Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at the authoritarian personality as a dispositional explanation of obedience which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of social influence. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. The authoritarian personality is a dispositional explanation of obedience proposed by Theodor Adorno, 1950, which suggests obedient behavior is caused by internal traits, characteristics, and dispositions of the individual such as personality type, rather than external situational factors. This collection of traits and dispositions are developed in childhood from strict, harsh, and rigid parenting. This creates resentment within the child as they grow up and, since they cannot express it at the time, their feelings are displaced onto others who are seen as weak or inferior. A person with an authoritarian personality is harsh, hostile, and dominant towards people of perceived lower status. They are conformist, conventional, dogmatic, and respectful towards people of perceived authority or obedient and servile towards people of perceived higher status. The authoritarian personality has several strengths and limitations. A strength of the authoritarian personality as an explanation of obedience is that there is research to support the link between authoritarian personality and obedience. Elms and Milgram, 1966, interviewed participants who went all the way to 450 volts. They all completed the F scale as part of the interview. These 20 participants scored significantly higher on the overall F scale than a comparison group of 20 disobedient participants. The two groups were clearly quite different in terms of authoritarianism. Those who were more obedient also reported being more distant to their fathers during their childhood, which supports the possibility of the authoritarian personality having been learnt through social modeling. This is a strength because it suggests that there is a strong link between authoritarian personality traits and obedience levels. The study's findings provide evidence of how individuals with higher authoritarian tendencies tend to exhibit greater obedience to authority figures, reinforcing the theory's premise regarding the relationship between authoritarianism and obedience. However, when the researchers analyzed the individual subscales of the F scale, they found that the obedient participants had a number of characteristics that were unusual for authoritarians. For example, unlike authoritarians, Milgram's obedient participants did not generally glorify their fathers, they did not experience unusual levels of punishment in childhood, and they did not have particularly hostile attitudes towards their mothers. This is a limitation because it challenges the conventional understanding by indicating that the characteristics exhibited by obedient participants in Milgram's study deviate from the expected traits of authoritarians. The absence of typical authoritarian attributes like glorifying fathers, experiencing childhood punishment, and harboring hostile attitudes towards mothers among the obedient participants highlights the complexity and variability within personality traits, suggesting that the link between authoritarianism and obedience may not be as straightforward as previously thought. A limitation of the authoritarian personality as an explanation of obedience is that it is a limited explanation as it cannot explain obedient behavior in entire societies. For example, in pre-war Germany, millions of individuals in Germany displayed obedient, racist, and anti-Semitic behavior. This was despite of the fact that they must all have different personalities. It seems extremely unlikely that they could all have an authoritarian personality. An alternative explanation is more realistic: social identity theory. Most Germans identified with the anti-Semitic Nazi state and scapegoated the outgroup of Jews. This is a limitation because it suggests that the theory falls short in explaining the widespread obedient behavior seen in pre-war Germany. The observation that individuals with diverse personalities exhibited obedience to anti-Semitic ideologies challenges the idea that everyone possessed an authoritarian personality. Instead, the social identity theory offers a more realistic explanation by emphasizing how individuals identified with the Nazi state as the in-group and targeted Jews as the out-group, highlighting the influence of social dynamics on behavior. A limitation of the authoritarian personality is that the F scale is politically biased. Christie and Jehoda, 1954, suggested that the F scale aims to measure tendency towards extreme right-wing ideology. But right-wing and left-wing authoritarianism, e.g. Maoism, both insist on complete obedience to political authority. Adorno's theory is not a comprehensive dispositional explanation of obedience to authority because it does not explain obedience to left-wing authoritarianism, i.e. it is politically biased. This is a limitation because it suggests that the F scale, used to measure authoritarian tendencies, is politically biased towards extreme right-wing ideologies. While the scale focuses on right-wing authoritarianism, it fails to account for obedience to left-wing authoritarianism like Maoism, which also demands complete obedience to political authority. Adorno's theory lacks a comprehensive explanation of obedience to left-wing authoritarianism, highlighting its political bias and limitation in fully understanding obedience across different political spectrums. A limitation of the authoritarian personality is that there are methodological criticisms. Greenstein, 1969, suggests the F scale is a comedy of methodological errors. For example, items are worded in the same direction, so the scale just measures the tendency to agree to everything. It therefore can be said to suffer from response bias and social desirability, where participants provide answers that are socially acceptable. In addition, researchers knew the participants' test scores when they interviewed them. Therefore, they knew who had authoritarian personalities. They also knew the study's hypothesis, which makes biased results likely. This is a limitation because it suggests that the data collected is meaningless and the concept of authoritarian personality lacks internal validity, meaning other factors' explanations may be responsible for obedient behavior. A limitation of the authoritarian personality is that a cause and effect relationship cannot be established between authoritarianism, parenting style, and obedience. The data used is correlational and therefore, a direct link between these three factors cannot be concluded, as other factors and elements such as innate temperament could potentially have affected the results. This is a limitation because it suggests that the observed correlations between authoritarianism, parenting style, and obedience may not solely be attributed to a direct causal relationship. The presence of other influencing factors, such as innate temperament, introduces complexity and challenges the straightforward interpretation of the data, emphasizing the need for a more nuanced understanding of the dynamics at play in shaping authoritarian personality traits and obedience behaviors. Adorno, 1950, conducted a study to investigate the authoritarian personality, aiming to understand the characteristics and tendencies associated with individuals who display authoritarian behaviors and attitudes. Adorno studied over 2,000 mainly white American students from middle-class backgrounds. He interviewed them about their political views and their early childhood experiences. He also used projective tests, neutral stimuli as pictures that could be used to gain access to people's thoughts, to assess whether or not they were racially prejudiced. Adorno found that people who had been brought up by strict parents who used harsh, physical punishments when they were children often grew up to be very obedient. Under these conditions, children quickly learnt to obey and develop a strong respect for authority. Adorno drew on Freud's ideas about the unconscious mind to build his explanation, arguing that harsh and physical punishment led to the child feeling hostile and angry towards their parents. This hostility was uncomfortable for the child and created feelings of conflict, so it might be repressed or locked away into the unconscious mind. The child then displaces these hostile feelings onto others, often of a different racial group, which then became an alternative target for their hostility. From his research, Adorno developed a number of scales to measure aspects of behavior and attitudes, including ethnocentrism, the preference for one's own racial group, antisemitism, prejudice against Jewish people, and, most famously, the potential for fascism, which has become known as the F scale. The F scale measures the authoritarian personality and is comprised of 30 questions assessing 9 personality dimensions. A limitation of Adorno's study is that his results may be affected by individual differences. Adorno's research only looked at people from middle-class backgrounds. Middendorp and Melion, 1990, has found that less educated people are more likely than well-educated people to display authoritarian personality characteristics. If these claims are correct, then it is possible to conclude that it is not authoritarian personality characteristics alone that cause obedience, but also levels of education. This is a limitation of Adorno's research because it suggests that the findings and conclusions drawn cannot be generalized to the wide variety of social groups and classes in the entire population. A limitation of Adorno's study is that it lacks population validity. The sample only consisted of college students. People of this age often lack experience within the real world as a result of being indoctrinated into the education system for the majority of their lives, and therefore are much easier to influence and therefore less likely to disobey a person with a higher status or someone in a more authoritarian position. The research does not demonstrate what would happen if the participants were of a different generation or older and therefore had more experience in the world and more knowledge. This is a limitation because it suggests that the results of this study cannot be generalized to other age groups, e.g. senior citizens. A limitation of Adorno's study is that it suffers from cultural bias. The sample only consists of Americans. America is an individualist culture, where people are generally less obedient, and the results may be different in collectivist cultures, e.g. China and Japan. This is a limitation because it suggests that the results cannot be generalized to other cultures and countries, e.g. China and Japan. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.